For the United States of America, the Jersey Shore region isn't just a coastal paradise, it's a cultural icon with atmosphere and unique vibe frequently featured in music, movies, and reality television. Its wide beaches, classic boardwalks with amusement rides and arcades, and diverse range of attractions, including water sports, casinos, and a vibrant nightlife. It is no wonder why it holds regional nicknames like Queen City or Beach Haven. Yet on the seemingly joyful day of July 2nd, 1916, that illusion came crashing down. In a series of fatal attacks from a deadly predator that lasted over a week, would swarm the breathtaking coast in a sea of red, like a scene from Jaws, and killed almost half a dozen people. By July 12th, the region was plunged into dread, and the front page of every newspaper said the same thing. This wasn't just a massacre. This was the beginning of a cultural war between man and beast that carries deep battle scars today. This is how the Jersey Shore got hit in pure horror. The Jersey Shore, commonly called the Shore by locals, is the coastal region of the U.S. state of New Jersey. The term encompasses about 141 miles of oceanfront bordering the Atlantic Ocean from Perth Amboy in the north to Cape May Point in the south. The region includes Middlesex, Monmouth, Ocean, Atlantic, and Cape May counties, which are in the central and southern parts of the state. Located in the center of the northeast megalopolis, the northern half of the Shore region is part of the New York metro area, while the southern half of the Shore region is part of the Philadelphia metro area. The Jersey Shore hosts the highest concentration of oceanside boardwalks in the United States. For a long time, this region felt like a paradise so perfect, some people called it a golden heaven. A stretch of blissful coastline with luxury resorts and culturally significant sights and atmosphere. But during the summer of 1916, the unthinkable happened when everyone least expected it. On July 2nd, 1916, crowds of people were out enjoying the sun and the water. One of them was Charles Epting Vansant, the 25-year-old son of a Philadelphia businessman. Vansant was swimming fewer than 15 meters from shore, playing with a dog. Then, bystanders on the beach looked out onto the water and saw a fin cutting through the surf behind Vansant. They shouted out desperate warnings for him to swim to shore. Vansant listened and began to make his way back to the beach, but the pursuing shark was closing fast. A moment later, Vansant was pulled under. In a stroke of fortune, one of the people on the beach was Alexander Ott, who had been a member of the American Olympic swim team in 1912. Ott took to the water and made for Vansant, but by the time he reached the struggling man, the damage was done. Nevertheless, Ott hauled a heavily bleeding Vansant back to shore. His leg had reportedly been torn open from thigh to knee. Vansant only survived for a few hours, dying that night in a nearby hospital. But he was only the first of many victims. Vansant's death was a strange tragedy, but it wasn't enough to spark a panic. People were still enjoying the water in the middle of a hot July. But then, on July 6th, at Spring Lake Beach, 32 kilometers away from Beach Haven, there was a second grisly incident. Charles Bruder, a 28-year-old hotel worker and Swiss native, was swimming beyond the lifelines at Spring Lake Beach. Suddenly, lifeguards heard him cry for help. They quickly launched a lifeboat and began heading toward him, but before they could reach him, he cried out, and the water began to turn red. A woman on shore, seeing the red shape, yelled that a red canoe had been overturned. But there was no canoe. The red shape was Bruder's blood. The lifeguards reached him only in time for him to name his attacker a shark and lost consciousness. When they dragged him into the boat, they realized in horror that both his legs had been bitten off, one above the knee and the other below the knee. There were also bite marks below his arm on his left side. Lifeguards attempted first aid, but Bruder died of shock and blood loss right there on the beach. The community was beyond shocked, especially the workers and guests at the nearby resort where Bruder had worked and was well known. According to a contemporary New York Times article, Many persons were so overcome with horror that they had to be assisted to their rooms. While the Spring Lake community mourned, taking up a collection for Bruder's mother back in Switzerland, local authorities took steps to prevent further attacks. Swimmers left the water, and a squad of boatmen began patrolling the coast to drive off any large sharks. But preventive measures, it seems, were localized. Or maybe the boys who went to bathe and play at Matawan Creek thought they were safe. After all, they were several miles from the seashore where the Coast Guard had reported huge numbers of sharks that very morning. Lester Stillwell was an 11-year-old factory worker who'd left work with a group of friends to visit the creek. Around the time he was leaving work, at a nearby trolley bridge, retired Sea Captain Thomas Cottrell saw a long dark shape gliding upstream with the incoming tide. Recognizing it as a shark, Cottrell ran to phone the barber, who was also the chief of police. The chief dismissed it as a prank. Cottrell tried to spread the word himself, warning off one group of boys. Meanwhile, a group of teens who'd also seen the shark warned Lester's group. According to Lester's best friend Albert O'Hara, they also thought it was a joke and went swimming anyway. It was Albert who later felt something like sandpaper brush against his legs under the water. Then he caught a glimpse of something that looked like a submerged log. A moment later, Lester was pulled under the water. Realizing what was happening, the boys began screaming and ran for help. Stanley Fisher, a 25-year-old man who had been close by, came running and leaped into the creek. He dove down to the muddy bottom and emerged with the body of Lester, who was already dead. Before Fisher could even make for shore bearing the body, witnesses saw him scream and go under as teeth tore into his thigh. The body of Lester Stillwell was found several days after the attack, a few hundred meters from the site of the incident. Witnesses said his small body had been bitten almost in half. But even before Lester was found, a frightened and vengeful populace took up arms against what lurked in the water. The banks of the Matawan were lined with people wielding rifles, shotguns, boat hooks, harpoons, pikes, and dynamite, according to a contemporary newspaper. To prevent the killer from escaping, chicken wire nets were stretched across the creek both above and below the attack site. That stretch of creek was then shot into, stabbed at, and exploded with dynamite charges, but no sharks were killed. This was despite a handsome reward, $100 per shark, offered by the local authorities. The coast itself swarmed with amateur shark hunters, who in the next few days managed to bring in several large sharks. But when their stomachs were cut open, they were exonerated post-mortem by the absence of human remains. As experts debated the attacks, sharks took on a mythical status. The article quoted above went on to say that a shark's thick hide would hardly make an impression from buckshot and was even impervious to bullets. The doctor who treated Stanley Fisher, Dr. George Reynolds, reported that there had been a poisonous liquid in the shark bite, and it was the poison that had killed Fisher. In the following weeks, vigilantes killed hundreds of sharks along the east coast. The federal government budgeted $5,000 for eradication efforts and discussed sending in the Coast Guard. Then, on July 14th, eccentric local taxidermist and former lion tamer Michael Schleiser announced he had caught the Matawan man-eater. As evidence, he produced a 7-foot-long, 300-pound white shark. As appropriate to his profession, he promptly taxidermied it. But first, Schleiser had scientists from the Natural History Museum examine it. Inside the shark's stomach, they found what they believed to be human bones. The bones and the taxidermy shark were lost sometime over the past century, so it's impossible to test them. However, it must be said that there were no further attacks. In a culture saturated with the imagery and mythology of aggressive, man-eating sharks, it's hard to imagine that we haven't always looked at this particular fish family with terror. When we read that large sharks had been seen in the area before the first attack, we wondered why people were so slow to get out of the water. In fact, the 1916 panic and the media reputation it inspired birthed our fear of man-eating sharks. Prior to these incidents, most people considered them fairly harmless. In 1893, a wealthy eccentric named Herman Ulrichs, asserting the harmlessness of sharks, offered $18,000 to anyone who provided a verifiable shark attack story. Ulrichs also tested his assertion himself by jumping into the sea and swimming up to a 3-meter-long shark. He emerged unharmed and never paid out the $18,000. After the 1916 incidents, officials declared that they'd been wrong. Sharks were man-eaters. Our new fear of sharks led to hundreds of millions of them being culled over the past century, threatening many keystone marine predator species. Nowadays, we know that the truth is somewhere closer to our pre-1916 understanding. Sharks are usually indifferent to humans, and attacks, especially a series of attacks, are usually due to something like habitat disruption or learned behavior. When we discuss the man-eating shark, the first thought is the white shark, commonly known as a great white. It's the shark in Jaws, the species of shark that Schleicher caught, and it's the largest predatory shark species. But nowadays, many are skeptical that a white shark was the species behind the Jersey attacks. While the white shark appeared on the suspect list at the time, contemporary reports mention the tiger shark just as often. A scientific write-up titled "The Shark Situation in the Waters About New York" names 19 shark species found in the area. Half a dozen of them could have been responsible for some or all of the attacks. These include hammerhead sharks, thresher sharks, brown or sandbar sharks, tiger sharks, and great white sharks. Today, however, the top of the suspect list is the up to 3-meter-long bull shark. While white sharks are actually rare in the area, bull sharks are somewhat less so. The key points in the bull shark's favor are its reputation for aggressiveness and its ability to swim upriver into freshwater. A bull shark wouldn't balk at swimming 18 kilometers upriver to the attack site, which would have been very unusual for a great white. We know that bull sharks have been responsible for attacks in Australia, South Africa, Nicaragua, India, Florida, and more, with many incidents occurring tens of kilometers away from the open ocean. But if there really were human remains in the stomach of Schleicher's great white, there's a good chance it was responsible for at least one of the attacks. Perhaps a great white killed the first 2 victims on the beach, and a bull shark was responsible for the tragedies in Matawan Creek. Whichever species it was, the behavior it exhibited in 1916 wasn't normal. Why the sudden rush of attacks? As with most animal attack stories, the answer was probably habitat disruption. The 1916 fatalities are believed to be the first recorded here. At the time, a shark attack in New Jersey was unheard of and even thought impossible. The Jersey Shore attacks immediately entered into American popular culture, where sharks became caricatures in editorial cartoons representing danger. The attacks became the subject of documentaries for the History Channel, National Geographic Channel, and Discovery Channel, which aired 12 Days of Terror and the Shark Week episode Blood in the Water. Like, share, and subscribe for more on Wild Wisdom.